Well, good morning in Washington, D.C., and good evening in Indonesia. Welcome to this month's Open Forum by the United States Indonesia Society, USINDO. I'm Christopher Wyrod. I'm the Vice President of USINDO. And today we'll discuss the legacy and impact of one of Indonesia's most prominent politicians in recent years, Joko Widodo, more commonly known as Jokowi. From his humble beginnings as a small businessman in Solo, Jokowi had a meteoric political trajectory. After becoming the mayor of his hometown, he quickly rose to national prominence as the governor of Jakarta, and he used that as a political catapult to the presidency. Riding a populist wave, his seemingly direct, pragmatic, and even at times kind of folksy leadership style made him very popular among the masses. And by bypassing the political elite, he built his own support base while co-opting or keeping his rivals off balance through his, at times, inscrutable demeanor and enigmatic decision-making. Jokowi embraced seemingly contradictory political positions, and as a result, his legacy has been mixed. On the positive side of the balance sheet, it's mainly economic successes. So Jokowi invested heavily in infrastructure development, especially in poorer and more remote provinces. He expanded and improved delivery of social programs, and even liked to conduct surprise buluskan visits to public offices to evaluate their performance himself. He led Indonesia as the first trillion-dollar economy in Southeast Asia. He kept economic growth very robust, and he also was successful in reducing poverty. However, on the negative side of the balance sheet, Indonesia's democracy suffered. Jokowi weakened and politicized the Anti-Corruption Commission and the courts through direct pressure and personal appointments. He also weakened environmental protections and eroded civil liberties. And then his final years in office were overshadowed by accusations of dynastic politics with the promotion of his sons into key political offices. So how can we reconcile this kind of Janus-faced portrait of Jokowi? Is he the visionary leader who promoted modernization and digitization of the Indonesian economy, the man who launched the new capital city project, Nusantara, to try and rebalance the country's political and economic development, and also the one who led efforts to add value to Indonesia's vast natural resources through industrial downstreaming? Or is he the illiberal populist who sent the country back down the road of centralized rule, weak oversight, patronage, and nepotism? Or is he both? Or maybe neither. So today we are lucky. We have invited Jean Couteau, who's the author of a new book called Understanding Jokowi, to help us better understand the motivations of Jokowi's policies. Jean is a longtime observer and resident of Indonesia, where he's been a regular columnist for Kompas for many years. He's also the author of over 24 books on Indonesia, and he has a doctorate in history from l'École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, the School of Advanced Social Science Studies in Paris. And he's also joined by his co-author, Benito Lopulalan, who assisted in writing parts of the book, Understanding Jokowi. So Jean, Benito, welcome and congratulations on your new book. I have a copy here. It's quite a hefty tome. It's over 650 pages. So a big congratulations to you both for this huge effort. And let's start our conversation. Maybe I'll start just asking Jean, please, just tell us about your new book, like what motivated you to write it and what you're hoping to convey to the audience. Go ahead, over to you, Jean.
Actually, I started writing the book almost by accident, you see. I used, as a columnist for Compass, to pay attention to the developments of Indonesian politics. Yeah. And in 2019, there was a moment when Prabowo showed up riding a horse. Yeah. And I wrote a column about Prabowo at the time. Yeah. My column in Indonesian became viral. I used a pantun at the end of my column. And I said, addressing Jokowi, I said, kau tak perlu kuda untuk berwibawa. I forgot the second part here. Kau tak perlu kuda untuk berwibawa. Cukup baju kau yang tidak bernoda. And it became viral. And through that, I got in touch indirectly with one of Jokowi's advisors. And we started talking. And I became interested in writing a book, which I decided to write on my own. There was no pressure and there was no assistance from Jokowi's team yet. So it's how you see I started being involved. After some time, I found that the work was too much for me, you see. I needed to have someone working alongside me, and I found Benito, an old friend of mine. We had started working together 30 years ago, you see, in the Bali Post, and I decided to bring him into the project here. So it's how it started. And it took me 2 years, more than 2 years to write the book, and 1 year to get it published. It was so difficult to get, for example, the pictures, you see, from today's presidential palace here. So it's how you see this book took form here. From the perspective I adopted from the beginning here, I tried not to adopt the Western perspective, seeing Indonesia as not yet able to fulfill this democratic expectation or having this or that index. In my opinion, we shouldn't, in the West, behave like that. It's like judging Indonesia like a teacher is judging children, as if it were Bloomberg or The Economist, which were giving good grades to the child, which is Indonesian. So I decided to adopt, you see, the central position, to put my research on Indonesian politics from the point of view of its actor, from the point of view of Jokowi. I tried to see what were the main obstacles Jokowi had to face from the beginning of his presidency. It was my approach here. And Benito found a nice name for that approach. Can you take over, Benito, now?
I think I need to go back to Chris. May I continue?
Yeah.
Yes, I think you need to unmute Benito.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when Sean contacted me, I was in not in Bali at the moment. At that moment, I was in outskirts of Bogor, and we discussed about the situation. If I'm not mistaken, it is after or around the comparison of the whole political spectrum of Jokowi, and what what put me into this collaboration is the award presidential study. So at that point, I think, so how come someone who uh, whose interest is cultural, sociological, ethnographic, or art could do the president study in this matter. So what is interesting is to how Shuang approach this book by doing the study from the bottom, seeing one particular issue after another, look at the year by year, and seeing how this year different to each other, and then it's very much keen to develop his analysis. He's not coming with a big assumption, but try to find what is happening during the process. I've been interested with Jokowi because he's not part of big parties. Elite. He's not a military background. There was a dream that he's part of the civil society, then with humble background, and this possibility put me in the hope that his presidency would go into good for Indonesia. So
all right, thank you
So
very
if I
much.
can take over, Ben, yeah, if I can take over now, you see. So what was my basic approach? Yeah. So let's say I didn't emphasize the political aspect. I didn't emphasize the problematic of democracy. Perhaps because basing myself on Ville with some Marxian nuances, I emphasize the economic structure. I think that democracy cannot take place before development. It's development which is bringing about democracy instead of the opposite. And I even underline indirectly in the book that the Indonesian upper classes, let's say the so-called oligarchy, are the Indonesian political elite, yeah, the democratic idealists. They are the objective ally of the Indonesian oligarchy. And through that, you see, let's talk about the main issue found in Indonesia. The main issue of Indonesia is to overcome the curse of raw materials, the curse of commodities, how to transform its wealth in commodities into continuous development. And the type of development which has taken place in Indonesia until very recently has never questioned what happened or has not questioned enough the socioeconomic structure which took place during the military days. During the Suharto days, Suharto obtained and reinforced his political power by granting concessions of forestry, of mining. In the process, he created an oligarchy which was basically a rent-seeking oligarchy. And the presidents after Suharto were unable to transform this rent-seeking economy into an industrializing economy. All of them failed, and they failed, even though it's the main problem faced by Indonesia. How to turn the capital accumulated through rent-seeking activities, through the exploitation of raw materials, to turn this capital into genuinely productive capital. That's the main issue here. And the oligarchy after Suharto have continued controlling the whole of Indonesia. In my opinion, the reformacy is only a reformacy. The reformacy has changed the top power of Indonesia. It has the military structure by a civilian structure, but it hasn't changed the socio-economic condition of Indonesia. It hasn't questioned the power, political and economic, the power of the oligarchy created during the Suharto days. So the main problem for a president claiming to represent the people like Jokowi, which you described rightly, you see, as someone coming from outside the traditional elites here. The main problem for someone like Jokowi was to go beyond the constraints created by this prominent oligarchy. And his 10 years rule was to try to generate accumulative growth through a transformation in Indonesian economy. But he did that within terrible constraints here, because he had to take account of the pressure on himself by the political parties, which to me, most of them were and are the representatives of the oligarchy I was talking about here. And the positive point of Jokowi, working within a system full of socio-economic constraints here, he managed to broaden, you see, his range of action and to bring about positive changes without undergoing a radical transformation of the society. He didn't face the oligarchy. He tried to work within the constraints imposed by this oligarchy. But at given times, he had to give way, which is why he didn't face the oligarchy when it came to the anti-corruption KPK law, which was voted with him, but not from him, you see, by the DPR of the time, yeah. And I think that Jokowi, you see, in his action was very systematic. He behaved like the former manager he has long been, you see. As soon as he took power, and I think in that matter, he should be, you see, a good example for any president. He had a very systematic approach to development. As soon as he was elected, he undertook an audit of Indonesia. He went around the country. He identified the main issues of the country, yeah. And then he took a number of steps which, on the one side, reinforced his power, at the same time, transformed the Indonesian economy. So what did he do very soon? He started by broadening the range of social security. He took social steps, the health insurance, assistance for elderly, and the teaching, the card for the students' card, and the like. When he did that, he didn't have the money. You see, the Indonesian budget couldn't have financed these social measures here. So almost at the same time, within 2 months, he took the step to cut the oil subsidies. And through the cut in the oil subsidies, which made up 20% of the Indonesian budget, he managed to finance his social steps, social measures. Yeah. He became automatically immensely popular. And the parties, the majority of which before didn't support him, started getting closer and closer to his own government. And at the same time, what did he start to do? He started by steps related to sovereignty. What did it mean? It meant to get back the national wealth, oil fields, mining in Papua, which Suharto had conceded to foreign investors in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, when he needed the support of the West. Yeah. Jokowi took steps to get back these national treasures. At the same time, and in line with the same need to restore full sovereignty, he unleashed his maritime minister, Susi, to have Indonesians taking over again the maritime wealth throughout the Indonesian seas, which were being rampaged by foreign fishermen. And all this made him very, very popular. And I think these were fantastic steps, actually, at the root of Jokowi's action. To me,
thank you. Well, that's a great overview. Thank you for highlighting the main sort of successes you see. You mentioned about Jokowi's attempt to really transform Indonesia and how he was up against some pretty entrenched interests. But philosophically, also, Jokowi, when he came to office, talked about needing a revolution mental, right? Like a mental revolution in order to change Indonesia. Can you tell us what he meant by revolution mental and whether he was successful after 10 years of this mental revolution for Indonesia?
You see, regarding the revolution mental, myself, I was asked at the time, you see, to go to several universities to talk about revolution mental. I didn't know what it meant, yeah. And in my opinion, it was again an illusion, because the mental revolution is not created, it doesn't come, you see, out of nothing. The mental revolution originates from education or economic transformation, economic sophistication. It's when we have the mentality really changing. The revolution mental is not a presidential decision. So it didn't quite work. He attempted to do that, but in my opinion, it was, if not a failure, it was an idealistic moment which had no real foundation, apart perhaps for the goodwill of quite a number of people throughout Indonesia. But I don't attach much importance to the so-called revolution mental. It's good for presidential speeches, but it doesn't come out of nothing, you see.
Right, more idealistic. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
well, maybe I can ask you more about his about Jokowi's management style. In your book, you highlight the importance of Javanese culture and society, Javanese norms in Jokowi's leadership style. You talk about concepts
regarding Jokowi's
talk about nimro, acceptance, topos liro,
and I think
empathy, gotong royong, working together. But some people also say that his Javanese approach also made him more inscrutable, right? Because it's hard to know what he really means. So can you elaborate on the importance of Javanese culture in both his approach to governance and maybe reasons why it's hard to understand him?
If you allow me, let's start with Jokowi's government style. First of all, he had a very good team of information collectors. He had a think tank at the presidential palace, yeah, with 20 or 25 mostly young people who collected information day by day throughout the country. And based on their information, they were a sort of think tank. They would make notes given to the president, and it would be or could be at the origin of decisions, and even at the origin of new policies. He had a very good grasp through what took place in the country through this and other information networks. At the same time, the ministers were kept under leash. You see, he would have every day several presidential cabinet meetings with selected ministers, with officials and private individuals coming from all over the country, you see. And they would be very efficient, attached concretely to projects or to attitudes and to politics here. At 7 o'clock in the morning, he was ready to work until deep into the night here. I'm not sure other presidents, and even today's president, is behaving in a similar way. And of course, his his cultural manner, you see, is deeply Javanese, yeah, emphasizing balance, yeah. In a social way, you see, emphasizing the importance of community, you see, seeing what is common between people rather than what is different. He was open-minded, not in a Western sense of the word, you see, through the notion of juridical tolerance, but I would say behavioral tolerance in the Javanese way. And when he talked about democracy, he always emphasized the Indonesian ways of democracy. He emphasized gotong royong here. And I must say that I understood is why he emphasized Javanese democracy, because to me, this brand of Javanese democracy is bringing about, if not a formal judicial type of democracy, let's say procedural type of democracy, it's behavioral, it's culture, it's part of cultural ways that bring about, if not democracy, peace and tolerance between the constituents of the nation. And as I tried to tell you at the beginning of our discussion here, to me, democracy is a product of development instead of the other way around. Yeah. So he didn't hesitate to transgress the rules of procedural democracy in the name of development. Why did he choose? Why did he side with Prabowo, you see? He told me, when I had an interview with him, yeah, he told me Indonesia had reached the level of secondary education. When you have reached the level of secondary education, you don't go down to middle level of education. And if you are at the middle level of education, you don't go back to primary level of education. And he was meaning through such speech, he was meaning the PDIP on the one side and Anis Baswedan on the other side. He needed someone, he wanted someone who could carry on with his basic development steps. He wanted someone who could carry on with the notion of Indonesia-centric development and with the Ilirisasi and his development steps in general. And I think in the matter, you see, as you emphasize yourself, it was his big success. He didn't hesitate to transgress the decisions of the World Trade Organization and to compel foreign investors, if they wanted to purchase Indonesian nickel, Indonesian bauxites, to have them investing into smelters into the transformation of raw materials. And he wanted in the matter to put an end to the colonial and post-colonial type of dependency in Indonesia. And I think it's where lies his main success, actually, because today, through the hilirisasi, through his downstreaming policies, you see, Indonesia is cashing more than 30 billion US dollars a year. It's also through the hilirisation is way to start a genuine industrialization of the country, because other types of industrialization haven't succeeded. For the good reason is that the Indonesian oligarchy, wealthy from its exploitation of mineral resources and the forestry, they have no interest. They are not motivated to invest into industrialization, like, let's say, the Koreans or the Taiwanese have been doing. But he has managed to start a process of industrialization, you see, from his downstreaming policies. And he has put an end to colonial and post-colonial dependency. And I think that's a great development from Jokowi. To me,
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds
the
like
democracy,
in your book you mentioned that's one of his most important economic strategies is hilirisasi and downstreaming. But it's a strategy started by President SBY. So why was Jokowi more successful at hilirisasi than SBY? And what does this mean for President Prabowo's attempts to continue hilirisasi process?
Because the problem with SBY, apart from the fact that he was closer to the military in general, you see, his will was not of the quality of Jokowi's will. And I am pretty sure that he sided with Prabowo based on his respect for Prabowo's will. To him, Prabowo was a man who could carry on with his economic policies. Perhaps he didn't know at the time that Prabowo wasn't as gifted wouldn't be as gifted as Jokowi to manage the state machinery, you see. We see what is taking place now. But it shows, obviously, Prabowo, because Prabowo decided that he would broaden the downstreaming policy, which is probably the key of Jokowi's presidency. And he said that he would continue the construction of the IKN.
Nusantara IKN, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he seems confident that President Prabowo was the best choice to continue his policies, regardless of other personal feelings they might have.
And myself, from the discussions I had with Jokowi, I think the dynastic aspect here was secondary to his deep wish to have someone continuing his policies. Yeah. If we see and if we know the condition of the PDIP, you see, we could doubt whether the PDIP would be able to have a strict, logical development policy and policies in general. As far as Anis, which was implicit, the risk with Anis was, of course, to have Indonesia stopping the hilirisation policy, but there was probably, I didn't get that from Jokowi, probably the risk to have an Islamization of the institutions of Indonesia, further Islamization of the institution, because Jokowi has always kept, you see, the middle ground in the matter of interreligious relations.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
So, Benito, do you have a few things to add?
Yes. In many.
Benito, I think you have to turn on your microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes. I can hear.
Yeah. In some of our discussion, we are during the process, there are two question about Jokowi, especially after the Mahkamah Konstitusi and during the process of involving the what's the law? That's I forgot. Sorry. Yeah. It is there are widespread discussion in Indonesia. It is morally right to have such a decision, but in this book it is much more we try to understand in what kind of structural situation that this decision is taking place. It is released by the Jokowi's and his counterparts' mind. So, so it is much more into this understanding the mode of the structural condition, how the interrelation between the oligarchy, the military, and the elites that creates this decision or legal decision, especially especially after the second period of Jokowi. Okay, I think that is.
Okay, thank you. That's useful background, and I guess it leads me to a question for both of you to think about. So, like in your book, you argue that Jokowi significantly changed Indonesia, but I think we also have to ask: did Indonesian politics change Jokowi into a more typical ruling elite than when he started?
But when you see Jokowi,
Jean, you have to unmute.
yeah.
You're both muted if you want to unmute to answer the question.
Does it work now?
I can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah. So the question is like,
sir.
how did the political environment that Jokowi found himself in as president, how did it change him, right? He also changed things, but he must have been changed. It sure seems like a different person at the start of his administration than 10 years later when he finished.
I didn't know Jokowi when he started being president. Yeah. I met one of his French friends who knew him before he was president. Yeah. And I met him a month and a half ago again, you see, to give him the book. Yeah. To me, Jokowi has remained probably the same type of fellow he was 10 years before. Yeah. He remains very simple. And of course, he doesn't fulfill Western expectations. Yeah. He is not, as I tried to emphasize, obsessed by democracy. He's more interested in democratization than immediate democracy. And to that extent, I think he is right. You're American. Probably you know that before the United States was a functioning substantive democracy, yeah. Previously, it was controlled by high capital, and you had slavery and things like that. The same with Britain, Holland, France, and the like, you see. Democracy is a product of development, not the other way around. And to that extent, that he forfeited democracy to put Indonesia on the road toward development, he was actually following the steps of people like Lee Kuan Yew and the South Korean presidents and the like, you see. He was following the East Asian way of trying to develop before bringing about directly or indirectly the democratization process. I think the obsession with democracy was born, as put by Fukuyama, you see, was born after the fall of the Soviet Union, when everyone was expected in the world, country after country, to turn democratic. So we do have some procedural democracies, like in Indonesia, but we cannot have functional, genuine democracy. The institutions are not ready, and the people do not have the sufficient autonomy of thought to be able to have their country functioning in a democratic way. Of course, in places like Surabaya, Jakarta, Bandung, and the like, we do have educated elites here, which are dreaming of democracy. But democracy cannot function. Try to open a church in Bogor, or I would say, you see, a mosque in Ubud. You see, it just doesn't work. The institutions are not ready to fully support, you see, the full democratization process. We are in the process of perhaps creating in the long run a democracy through, of course, democratic movements. But structurally, the country is still far from being democracy. And as I told you, the democratic parties are often at least their members are often the objective allies of the oligarchy, which is paralyzing the evolution of the Indonesian economy, because they are reluctant to invest in production. They prefer to rely on their rent-seeking activities by cutting the forest, and that's my opinion. And of course, in the matter, I'm opposed to many members of the today's Indonesian educated elites here, who are dreaming. And perhaps you don't agree with me, which Benito doesn't fully agree with me. I'm too realistic.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's interesting perspective, and you highlight this in your book. It's certainly a one perspective, maybe not one that everyone would agree with. Maybe you'll see we are getting questions. I would invite our audience to please feel free to type any questions you have for Jean and Pa Benito, anything you'd like to discuss with them. This is kind of an open discussion, so free to ask any questions. We do have the first question from Wayne Forrest. I think you've more or less addressed it, but basically your description about the sequencing of democracy is not necessarily one that a lot of, especially Americans, agree with, as you might expect, right? That the necessity of fundamental things like rule of law, having independent branches of government, and making sure that those who have power are respecting the democratic norms is kind of the fundamental.
Jangan dipotong, Chong.
Yeah, well, let me move on to another question from Vikram Nehru. Thank you, Vikram, for your question. Let me just read it here. You can also see it on your screens there, Jean Benito. But Vikram says, ironically, during Jokowi's administration, growth barely budged above 5% a year. Income and wealth inequality continued to rise, although that might be disputed in some of the statistics you quote in your book. And democratic institutions were steadily eroded. What then explains Jokowi's immense popularity right through the end of his tenure? We know he came in with high approval ratings. He left with very high approval ratings, the highest in history for any president of Indonesia.
Of course.
How do you explain that?
You see, of course, if we talk of 5%, no more than 5%, you see, the infrastructure is not directly bringing about the increase in growth, in economic growth. You see, the impact of infrastructure is visible in the long run, not in the short run. I think that's very important to underline. So, at the same time, why does Jokowi remain highly popular? Because of the social steps he took here, and which is why I am talking about the broadening of his range of action within a political space full of constraints here. He managed to invent, you see, a social security system within Indonesia, you see. And people support Jokowi probably mainly for this reason, apart from the fact that he originates from the little people. Then, yeah.
So there is another, the third question. Are you?
Sure, you want to move on to the next question? We can also, this is another question from Wayne Forrest. Just mentioning, yeah, it's about democracy again, and saying that, he noticed even and other political scientists have noticed that democracy is not necessarily something that has to be only at the national level or at the presidential level. You can see democracy in action in the village level, and just the importance of thinking about democracy beyond just a man or an institution. It's more of a comment than a question, but I have a question for you. So now we see that Jokowi is embarking on a new safari politic, right? He's on this political safari. Even as we speak, he's out rallying his base, doing sort of a campaign style tour through his strongholds. He's, I think, today in NTT and Kupang, West Timor, rallying people. What do you make of this? What is this safari politique?
So should I talk? Yeah, of course, yeah. Actually, I wouldn't say, he doesn't say himself that he is disappointed by the way things are doing, you see. But he may not say it directly. But of course, he would like the government to be more efficient than the present government happens to be. So he has not turned to the opposition but he's biding his time. Yeah. Then to buy.
Yeah, okay. I think there is a Jokowi is a realist. Jokowi is a realist, and during the process of his power in his presidential time, he start to understand there is not only one reality. I mean, in Indonesian politics, you have layers of reality, and sometimes it contradict to each other. Like the one in Papua, for instance, it is layers of economy at the same time, a layers of military involvement. At the same time, layers of various map of the of Papua in terms of socio-economic mapping. So I think at the firstly, Jokowi could solve the contradictions by building a teamwork, by listening to people from the different side, like in Papua again, for instance, when he talks to military to make a how you call to count, to report every single bullets that is
Yes.
in Papua, like a bullet account. It is a way to solve the contradiction among realities of politics, social economy in Indonesia. But I do think that's he himself received some contradiction as president during the process. He'd been party officer, petugas partai, for instance. I mean, he was labeled into it is his own reality also contradict to each other. So I think at some point, indeed, there are problems that he couldn't fully solve. The contradiction of political elite, for instance, the contradiction between how the oligarchy works. He tried to solve the problem by providing ways for for the oligarchy to move, supporting the development. But I have to admit at some extent he also cannot provide, or still looking for how to deal with some matters. And in that case, I would say that his approach to include Prabowo, to put the contradiction outside, become to part of the governance, also a way to solve, to deal with the reality of this Indonesian politics, socio-economic, and society. So John choose the phrase progressive realism in the to describe Jokowi, and I think within this what the term, also there is a understanding that that Jokowi as a realist also see the contradiction, and he want to bring it into the progress side.
Yeah, he was faced with constraints here. He didn't face the oligarchy head-on, you see. He expected them and even asked in some instance to some of them to change their behavior and to invest in a creative way through his illirization process. Yeah. But he didn't have the political power to transform, you see, the socioeconomic structure of Indonesia. And he had also to deal with the presence of the army. Benito has talked about Jokowi's policy in Papua and Jokowi's order to have every bullet reported to him in case of any security problem in Papua. But he had to face the fact, from what I was told by one of Jokowi's advisors, that many members of the army were dissatisfied because, unlike the military who became pensioned during the days of the military regime, today's military are just ordinary officials. They are not in the position to accumulate the same kind of money. And there was discontent from the army under Jokowi, which is probably the reason why, you see, there was a new law regarding the army, which was voted under Prabowo, because the pressure, which didn't come often in the open, you see, was always there, yeah. So Jokowi has to face many constraints, yeah. But there is another aspect which I would like to...
Now he's out of office and retired, but he's out campaigning. What do you make about that?
Of course, he probably want to come back into the it's why we can guess, you see, when he's talking, he wants to get back to the political struggle, of course, yeah. To me, that's something which seems to be obvious, but he is not, until now, he has not been too direct in the matter. He remains a supporter of Prabowo, but perhaps it will change according to the evolution of the political balance. There is another point I would like to underline. You told me the rule of law here. Again, we are faced with a normative Western approach here. Things do not start with the rule of law. The rule of law is a product of an economic evolution. The laws are created when they are needed by the economic balance of the day, you see. They don't rule change. They reverberate the economic change, if I dare say, yeah. And of course, Jokowi was not obsessed, like his opponents, by the rule of law and by democracy, which doesn't mean that he wanted to discard these concepts here. They were part of the needed pressure, you see, which exists in any government to rule the state. But according to Jokowi, and the way, at least that's the way I see, it cannot be, you see, the rule of law, the obsession with democracy cannot be the principles on which one rules any country, you see.
Thank you. Rule of law, that's a good segue to the fourth question we have. The audience member is asking about what happened at the end of his term that caused so much controversy. And we can get your thoughts about Jokowi's approach to go around some of the constitutional provisions that limited terms. You know, he played with the idea of extending for a third term. He was able to get the Constitutional Court to lower the age limit so that his son could be vice president candidate. How does that, fit into the rule of law? And what was his motivation for that? What was he doing?
When we asked Jokowi what happened in October 2023, he says that he was supposed to support Ganjar because he had been a member of the PDIP, you see, for so many years. Yeah, but he was disappointed by Ganjar's attitude, which followed Megawati's directives rather than his own directives as president. Yeah. So he concluded, he didn't use a word with me, that Ganjar didn't have the, I was going to say, he didn't have the balls, you see, to be a president. Yeah. And he was just petugas partai, to use the word used by Megawati. And then, Ganjar and Prabowo, there was a discussion between them who they were supposed to be together, but they couldn't agree on the matter, you see. Prabowo didn't want to be the vice president, nor did Ganjar. So it was decided on the one side that Prabowo would be the candidate, and they voted to know who would be the vice president. And it's when the name of Jokowi's son came up after several votes. That's the official explanation of the phenomenon. Of course,
right.
It was what we call in Indonesia a sort of pat gulipat, and we do not know who managed it. Was it Prabowo? Was it Jokowi? Was it more indirect from people, you see, behind Prabowo or behind Jokowi? One doesn't really know, you see, what took place. There are several versions in the matter. And of course, the Constitutional Court, you see, lost its face, you see. But at the same time, what took place then is a demonstration of what I am trying to emphasize, that Indonesia is not mature enough to have a substantive democracy. We have people yearning from democracy. We have the construction of people wanting to build up genuinely democratic parties. You have the broadening of the idea, but structurally, the country is not yet mature enough sociologically and economically to generate the type of individuals who can select their representative based on their own perception of things rather than as part of a clientele, you see, of a patronage system, you see. We haven't reached that stage yet. And the stage demands development. These developments, which is creating, I follow Tocqueville, since you're American, which is creating the kind of socioeconomic structure which is going to generate, perhaps in the long run, democracy in Indonesia. The trend is there, the reality is not there. And what should be done is to carry on with a kind of uneven, just full of hesitation toward, of course, what we can call democratization in the long run, while avoiding, you see, the kind of political clash which will destroy the whole process. Yeah.
Well, we have a little time left, maybe enough for a couple more questions. From our audience, let me just quickly share questions from Vikram Nehru. He's got a couple of short questions. One about Nusantara, and this is outside the scope of your book, so this is more just your personal thoughts. Whether you know how Jokowi feels about Nusantara, Prabowo's progress or lack of it on Nusantara. Vikram Nehru is asking whether how Jokowi thinks about Prabowo lowering Nusantara as a national priority. That's the first question. And second is more about the dynastic politics. To what extent do you think Jokowi is, maybe part of this safari politique, who knows, trying to promote his son's political interests and think about, his son as maybe a future president or his future political role. So if you can answer those questions about Nusantara and then, dynastic politics.
Yeah, regarding Nusantara, you see, I have been there twice. Yeah. And I was very impressed by the progress in the construction of the future capital. Very impressed, yeah. The first time, there was nothing there. The second time, 1 year later, the presidential palace was built, and you see you had buildings sprouting all over the place here. I was, okay, you still get me. And of course, the Nusantara was part of Jokowi's attempt at transforming Indonesia from a country, you see, just based with an unequal distribution of political and economic power between Java and the outer islands, into a more, how to put it, you see, a more organic kind of unity, you see, to go beyond the notion of Indonesia as being a compound of an imagined community, you see, toward a more integrated reality. That's the purpose of Nusantara. And perhaps it hasn't reached the same level of priority it had during the days of Jokowi. But we still in charge there in Nusantara Jokowi's best former minister, Basuki Adi Mulyono, you see. He's in charge of Nusantara. And the construction of that is continuing at a slow rate, but it's continuing. What was your other question?
Second was just for you to think about or give your thoughts about
the press.
Jokowi's intentions for his son, Gibran, in the future.
I must say. Yeah, Gibran. I must say that there is dynastic policies at all levels in Indonesia. You have Megawati, you have SBY's son, unavoidable. You have Gibran. It's embedded in the mindset of the people. Yeah. It might be part also of Jokowi's mindset, you see. When you are a furniture designer, when you are a joiner, you see, like Jokowi, it's normal to transmit your instruments to your son. Is probably part of the deep mentality. I don't say it's good or bad, but it's part of the reality. Ben?
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you, are we still...
Yeah, maybe one last question, then we'll wrap up if you don't mind.
Washington?
Yes. So the last question from me is just tell us what you think will be the most lasting legacy from Jokowi's presidency. What do you think will he be known for in 10, 20 years? What will be the biggest legacy?
We were wondering about you. Yeah, you disappeared for a couple of minutes.
But deep down, beyond that, there is the way Jokowi handled power as a manager based on realism toward the economic picture and toward the mindset of the people.
John, I think you're muted there. You can just summarize again what you think the legacy of Jokowi's presidency will be.
There is economic development, but deep down, beyond that, there is the way Jokowi handled power as a manager based on realism toward the economic structure and toward the mindset of his people. Yeah.
Well, that's a great summary. Yeah, I think that's a great summary. Maybe we'll wrap it up, leave it there, Jean. Thank you very much for your time, Jean and Benito. It's been an interesting and lively discussion. Again, congratulations on your book.
You're asking me, Ben.
Impressive. And we'll hope to stay in touch with you and get your thoughts about Jokowi in the future. So thanks again, and thanks to all our audience and viewers. It's been an interesting time with you, and thanks for all your questions. Take care. Thank you.